So if we have had this fundamental insight into the nature of mind, even if it's very subtle, not a traumatic event, not necessarily a gensho or an obvious shift, you can look into resistance from a very different place. So resistance is basically grounded on belief that reality could or should be different than it is. So whenever you notice that resistance activates, in whatever way it happens, so it can feel like a subtle sense of tension, contraction, and that the innate vastness apparently contracts or withdraws and creates a sense of interiority that is apart from the world, and they can be a sense of confusion or anxiety, hostility, depression, worry, rumination, cynicism. So these are just the different ways the kind of numbness, existential numbness starts to appear in our experience when we start to resist what is, and when that resistance is then starting to take increasingly more fettered forms in our experience. So the initial, you could say, reaction of pushing against reality that's purely energetic. But if we are not able to catch it, in that phase, then it usually proceeds to a more contracted experience that consists of a certain emotional tone and certain specific emotions that start to appear, and certain thought patterns, certain narratives, whether they concern past or present or future. There's usually a lot of thought activity going on. And at times that can be absent. So there's not really any detectable narrative. And yet there is this very felt visceral somatic sense of contracting and resisting and pushing against reality, and simultaneously kind of pulling inwards. So this is the fifth fetter stuff. I'm just speaking about it now in a more universal manner. So the first thing you want to do is that, you recognize that resistance is happening. You recognize the symptoms. And then you want to ground yourself into these sensations, into your body. Just feel directly, like where in the body the contraction, the tension, the anxiety, the restlessness, the rumination, it feels like. Like maybe it's in the chest area, maybe it's in the throat or head area, maybe it's in the back of your body, maybe it's in your belly. So it can have multiple locations, but we want to find a kind of entry point somatically to ground this investigation. And then it can start to shift and morph from there, how the resistance appears and disappears. Because what usually happens when we start feeling into it directly, as a pure sensation, especially when we have this capacity to tap into direct experience prior to conceptualization. So it's very possible that the apparent sense of resistance suddenly dissolves, and there's just the immediate openness or neutrality. And then we want to stay there, just stay like very intimate and very present with the openness, with the neutrality, without going into any kind of meditative state, because in this type of investigation, that tends to then create a little bit of a dissociation. So we actually lose contact to that subconscious and somatic movement of resistance, and we start to drift into a pleasant meditative state, and that can work as a momentarily relief, of course, that the resistance seems to be gone, but it will never address kind of the root beliefs connected to that specific form of resistance that was activated, the root beliefs and these kind of deeper aspects of the psyche, like this raw psychic somatic energy that is oftentimes unconscious, and it takes quite a bit of work to really expand into those parts of ourself in a conscious manner and start to integrate them. So this is all really crucial when we are working with resistance. So we use somatic sensations and we use narratives or images, thoughts, as a way to enter in deeper communion with the resistance, and then it can open from there further. So maybe we realize that the initial narrative that was activated, that wasn't actually the issue. That was more like a surface phenomenon. And underneath, there is a lot more fundamental narrative or conception or ideation going on. So then we want to recognize that for what it is. And again, notice, well, how does this feel somatically, this specific form of a narrative? And there can be a kind of resistance of resistance that appears in this type of investigation, right? We are investigating resistance, and then there is resistance of doing that, and that can then show up as thoughts that, like, I don't want to do this. I don't know how to do this. Like, why do I have to feel this again? I just want this to go away. I just want to feel good. Or I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't care in this type of little bit cynical manner that is often a kind of signature of egoic identity, because the I don't care that arises from this freedom and spontaneity of natural states, and abiding recognition of Rikpa. It's a very different I don't care or carefree attitude. But yeah, so you want to just notice these type of subtle ways the ego may be hijacking the investigation. Often it can take these spiritual forms, that it can use these spiritual concepts as a way to not to engage with the direct felt sense of discomfort, basically, or suffering. But even calling it suffering is often not that conductive. In my experience, I think discomfort is a little bit more neutral and accurate way of describing how it actually feels like. This kind of sense that it's very hard to be in your skin, so to speak. It just feels extremely, like like you would have under your skin like something spreading through your system, and it's just like you can't access it. You don't really understand what it is, and it almost tends to intensify if you're just staying silent and still, and tapping into that kind of vague, fundamental textural restlessness, how it can feel like. So that's the ninth feather stuff, which is kind of they're contributing to the more lower feathers, which are much more easily inquired into. So, but all the feathers, they co-arise, right? So it's a co-emergent arising. The feathers are not independently existing. I think that's good to remind. They're not linear in the way that it's easily to understand that they are. So they are very interconnected. They're not fixed. So yeah, use the insight of shunyata, the insight of emptiness, if you are familiar with that. When you do this type of investigations, it will just make it a lot more creative and open-ended and indeterminable. And it can lead to very unexpected places when this type of reification is not going on. So even if we are doing this type of fifth feather inquiry, that's just one particular framework that we are using, to kind of skillfully engage with our experience in a way that is liberating. But you want to be open-minded to shift, to potentially to another feather if it spontaneously appears, if it's indicated intuitively that, hey, maybe that's actually what's happening here, or shift into a completely different map or framework if that feels more true to you in that moment, or drop all the frameworks altogether and practice the non-meditation, the pathless paths, the direct approach, where you don't manipulate the experience at all. You don't do anything. So that means basically stopping the inquiry altogether. You're just being this primordial presence, this primordial uncontrived presence that doesn't interfere, within which the phenomena, the fixating psychic energy, it can spontaneously self-liberate. So that's the methodless method, so to speak, and you can even alternate with that and inquiry. So like use your intuition. Use your intuition, because only you can know, like, what is it that your experience is at this moment. Like if it feels like there's a blockage and you are struggling with the blockage and you can't really proceed on your own, then it's sometimes skillful to look into it together with someone else. You can maybe book a session with an awakening facilitator, things like that. But fundamentally, like, you are the authority of your own experience, and the creative power that your mind is capable of is like astonishing. Actually, it's astonishing when it starts to unlock. So what apparently blocks it or obscures it is this experience of fettered sense of self. So the more that starts to unbind, unwind, unravel, and dismantle and dissolve, the more this starts to shine through, this true freedom and creativity, which is what the mind is, this open potentiality, this open boundlessness. And then you can start to trust, like genuinely trust that liberation, self-liberation is inherent to the functioning of the mind. When you get a taste of it, like once, twice, and then like as a just a way of being, as a way of engaging with the experience, that you start to notice, you start to recognize that there is this self-liberating dimension to it whenever we are, able to remain in that open, uncontracted presence, as our fundamental identity, in that self-knowing clarity. So it's not identity, actually, but it's a way of replacing that conditioned identity, that constructed identity, like your sense of self, as a fabrication, as a person. So you replace that sense of self as this direct, immediate, visceral, timeless, felt sense of being the space.